Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry.
And I am Chris Huddleston.
And today we are very excited to be talking to you about The Hand.
You think I've done something wrong, don't you?
Terror he could not forget.
You think there's something in there, don't you?
Torment he could not bear.
You want to see?
Truth he would not face.
Hey! Take a look!
Orion Pictures presents Michael Caine in The Hand.
You don't want me to go to New York with you, do you?
I'm not talking about a separation or anything permanent or anything like that. I thought you understood that. I thought that was why you said that I
Well,
could...
we obviously do not understand each other. Look out! Get back!
How does it feel?
Like they're still there, my fingers. Like they're moving.
You'll have phantom feelings for years. Heat, irritation, pain. Your memory is still feeding familiar sensations of having a hand along your nerve endings.
What have you been doing during these blackouts? Misplacing things. I'd be scared if I were you.
Did you see my signet ring?
No. Are you all right?
Oh, yes. You never know what you can do. The unconscious is capable of anything. You could do anything you ever dreamed of and never had the guts to do.
Hi. I like the way you look at me.
Blackouts are nothing to fool with. You could kill somebody. It's all up there, and you'll never know. Know what? Who you are.
Don't be afraid of the pain. Tell me what you're feeling.
You're trying to kill me, aren't you?
Sense it, feel it, touch it.
You want to destroy me?
What is your image?
A man trapped in a nightmare. Locked in the grasp of
The Hand.
Oh, John.
John?
John?
What's the matter? Why are you looking at me like that?
There's no hand.
Michael Caine in The Hand.
Okay, excellent trailer. So, I cannot wait to unpack this one with you. Do you have a synopsis for us?
I do. So The Hand is a 1981 film written and directed by Oliver Stone. This was his second movie, and it stars in the lead role Michael Caine. This was his 50th film at this point. So, one guy in the beginning of his career, another guy well into his career. Michael Caine plays a cartoonist who has a newspaper comic strip called, what was it called? Mandor or something like that. It's kind of like
Mandor.
yeah, kind of like Conan the Barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
He and his wife, the very beginning of the movie, after an argument or during an argument, they're involved in a car accident, and he loses his hand. And also he loses his ability to draw at that point and to work on his comic strip. The wife, the argument that they were having was over her wanting to move to New York, which he did not want to do. But they do, however, move to New York. His publisher, I guess, decides to bring in a different artist to work on his comic strip. This upsets him. He basically, I guess, gets kicked off of his own strip. To make a living, he decides to take a teaching job in California. So he moves there. The wife stays in New York City. And he starts to gradually become insane, I guess. And people who cross him start to be murdered. Maybe by his disembodied hand, maybe just by him. We can talk about that. So that's pretty much the synopsis.
That's correct. And one of the things I'm so excited to talk about this movie is it was directed by Oliver Stone, starring Michael Caine. It is a horror movie, no questions asked. It's a horror movie about a disembodied hand that kind of crawls around killing people. And so you buys a ticket, you sees a show. It's not, there's no secret subterfuge. There's no confusion in the marketing. It is that movie. And the question, as you just pointed out, that really we're forced to wrestle with for most of the film is this hand really crawling around killing people? Or is he crazy? Is he doing it and sort of having these blackouts and imagining this disembodied hand, doing what he's really doing? And we don't find out. I would say, because of course, spoilers, we're going to ruin this movie for you. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want to know what happens, then go watch it. Otherwise, we're going to talk about it. So I would say even right up until the very end, it's not. I mean, I guess at the very end, we discover that the hand is real. Is that how you interpreted that?
I guess. I don't know. So we have to say basically he gets so when he goes to California, he becomes involved with a female student. He starts sleeping with her. She's actually involved with another teacher. This upsets him, and either he or the hand kill the girl and kill this other teacher. And then at the very end, he is forced by the sheriff to open up the trunk of his car, and there's the body of the girl in there. So then the very end of the movie is this, everything is, pretty, seems fairly realistic until this very end, that he's not in prison or anything. He's in some kind of a lab where he's hooked up to a lie detector machine or something. And this woman is questioning him. And, he's basically, she's saying that the hand is not real, that it's just him. And the very last scene is the hand choking her to death. And he laughs and gets up out of the chair. So, but it's very, that ending part is very weird because it's like, what is this place that they have him in?
Yeah, that's true. But I guess now that you mention it, there are things that first of all, a disembodied hand, it doesn't fly around, right? Ostensibly it crawls like,
Thing from the Addams Family.
Like crawls around like, sort of with its fingers and like a bug. And so there's no way. Well, first of all, it comes sort of flying through the air and grabbing people by the throat. And then there's no way that a hand could do that. But you just say, whatever, it's a horror movie. But there's absolutely no way that a disembodied hand could muscle. They open the trunk and it's both the co-ed that he was having an affair with and the other teacher that had been interested in the co-ed. So there's two bodies in the trunk. And there's just no way that a disembodied hand
could lift these people.
The physics defies it. There's even with cartoon logic. So maybe what we get at the end is that it's both. He's been, the hand and him have been doing it during his blackouts. He's been either controlling the hand or in cahoots with the hand. The hand does the killing and he does the sort of cleanup.
Yeah, that's a good take. I never thought about that.
He wakes up out of it and is shocked to discover what has happened. We cover that explicitly in the film. It's like, oh, you've been having these blackouts. Anything could happen. You could be killing people, Stepping back away from the ending for just a second, let's talk about the overarching, just the film as a film. I found this really refreshing after Possessor and some of the other recent ones we've watched where it's like, oh, it's sort of a this, but it's also kind of a that, or it was billed as a this, but instead it's the other thing. This is billed and built as a kind of a high-end B horror movie, right? It's a B horror movie concept. and the execution and the shape of it and the structure of the jump scare scenes um, are all like just right out of the standard recipe book. And I thought for what it was it corny and cheesy sometimes? Absolutely. But I thought it was really well executed, right? And I had shivers running down my spine. I mean, there's literally a couple of times where a black cat, and the music builds and the black cat goes, meow, it really got me. So I thought, like, I can't ask for more than that. Like,
No,
that's pretty entertaining. Did you agree with that?
yeah, absolutely. It's well made. So you have between Oliver Stone and Michael Caine, you have two guys who have, according to IMDb, they have 5 Oscars between the two of them. So
Yeah.
I think Michael Caine has 2 and Oliver Stone has 3. And then you have the wife was familiar, but I don't know. Her name is Andrea Marcovici, I think is how you say it. But she was familiar. I'm not exactly where I know her from, but like the other teacher has been in a lot of stuff. The guy who takes over his comic strip who's only in one scene. I don't know if you recognize who that guy is, but he's the voice of Roger Rabbit.
No kidding.
Yeah. So it has a bunch of. They're all good actors. I mean, there's not really any poor acting in this. The movie's well shot, well put together. There are obviously the hand crawling around there's cheesy things with that, but it's all played really straight. It's not I don't think meant to be corny, and it's about as good as a movie about a disembodied hand killing people can be. You know what I mean? It's not
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not
I do.
This is not a.
But there are
Go
all
ahead, sorry.
these. There are all these like. They feel like old 1950s. Like there is a scene early on where he's out searching for the severed hand and in the tall grass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a like hand cam where the camera is down in the grass, like looking up at him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a silly shot, but it's very effective in terms of affecting the mood. And they also do this sound design thing that sounds like heavy breathing. When you are the hand POV, there's a sort of a
and
like
I had
the hand is breathing,
I had the subtitles. I had the subtitles on, so like that scene where he's looking for the hand in the tall grass, it says heavy breathing on the screen, and I'm like, "Who is the hand breathing? Is he breathing?"
But
there are times when there are also other times where it's like the hand is doing something, and I thought of it as hand vision, where it's black and white. So kind of, I guess, where he's having his blackouts or whatever, a lot of that is in black and white. This is kind of a neat touch.
Very broad stroke B film things, and they really play the soundtrack. Like when tension is building, the music is really letting you know, and it's cranking it up. But so again, like with the hand cam and the breathing, I would chuckle to myself, but I'd have a shiver running down my spine. And then he'd get down on his hands and knees where his neck was like close to the tall grass. And I was like, oh no, don't, don't get your neck down there where it can catch it. Like it had me going. And I thought Oliver Stone, what I felt like was the filmmaker was saying, how do you make a horror movie? All right. So, you really just follow the ABCs of it. And here are the ways that you can use the camera and the soundtrack and things to build dramatic tension. And how you do, jump scare 1, jump scare 2, and then the big payoff. And he just kind of followed the roadmap, but he did it. And the clunky elements or the corny elements didn't get in the way of the effectiveness of following that formula.
Yeah.
He even put himself in it. He's the first one that the
victim,
hand kills. Yeah, he's a drunk and he's like swearing at him or
like
whatever.
A homeless guy, yeah. And
And
that's
I
just
thought
kind
that
of
was a
like he
nice
just
touch too.
yeah, and that's just kind of like Michael Caine just bumped into the guy, so it's like he's got to die because he bumped into him, you know. But yeah, it's a and you know it was I don't know what the studio was, but it was a major studio release. So it has a you know there's definitely a polish to it. It's not like it was a cheap
Right.
you know first time director. You know
Right.
he's got $500,000 or whatever to
It doesn't feel like it was shot on a home movie camera. It
no
feels like a
no
studio movie.
yeah, it looks like a movie from 1981, just any, you know, a drama or something from 1981 or, you know.
Now, I have a question for you because one of the things that I was interested in is so one of the questions you have in any of these movies is like why? Why is the hand killing people or why is he killing people or why are he and the hand killing people together? And my take on that I think is was pretty clearly spelled out although never explicitly stated is that he's got a sort of a troubled marriage.
Mhm.
She read as a younger woman to me. They have a young daughter.
Oh, yeah.
We don't really get into the why it's troubled when we meet them, but she wants to move to New York and have some more freedom, some more space. And and he bristles at that, and so we right from the beginning we get that he's a little more rigid. He's maybe a little more controlling, although he's very mild mannered. He's got kind of long wavy hair and he keeps it kind of combed back in a very kind of buttoned up
And I
way
like
and
that. I
he
don't mean
doesn't
to interrupt you, but I liked that his hair gets kind of crazier as he gets
yes
crazier. You know, as it
yes
goes along, his hair gets curlier, and I thought that
yes
was
which
funny.
is we're laughing about because it's like you're like oh my god, but it's very effective. Like he looks
Yeah.
truly unhinged by the end. He's got
And
this
Michael Caine does Unhinged really well,
he
you
really
know.
does. Yeah, he's it's almost a fright wig by the end. He looks
Mm.
truly deranged.
And you
But
feel like
he's
he's
got
a guy, like you said, he's mild-mannered, but it's it's kind of like there's this anger simmering underneath and the
that he
you know we
keeps
don't know how long
repressing.
they've
He
yeah
keeps
yeah
repressing that anger.
we don't know how long he and the wife have been having trouble, but it's kind of funny with her because everything with her is just well you know wouldn't it be good if we had some time apart and you could meet new people. And he's like you know you're my wife. but but yeah he starts to and that um you know that anger starts to, and you know it's understandable. uh if you lost your hand and you can't do your work that you love anymore, that would you know that would make a person angry. um
Yeah, and we meet his mother, who is a very domineering. I mean, they have dinner together, and she's basically telling him what to do, do this, do
mhm,
that. And at one point, she even reaches over and is cutting his food for him on his plate, which I
right
thought was a great touch. And he's
yeah
sort of seething the whole time. And then we meet his literary agent or whatever, and she's very like his mother. She's very
right
controlling, and whenever he has she says oh, that's not, you don't mean that, or whatever. He doesn't have much agency in his relationship with these women. And I think that's true to a degree with his wife. And, not, which is not setting him up as a perfect character. He isn't great at expressing his feelings. He bottles
mhm.
up his anger. And when it comes out, it's very explosive. We see him, yelling at his wife a number of times throughout the film before we get a body count. Um, but I thought so. To answer the question, why is it more? I feel like it's just more. This is a guy who has repressed a lot of his dramatic feelings and maybe the cartooning of this sort of alpha man. He says of what was it again? Is it Mandor?
Mandor something like that yeah
Um, Mandor doesn't he doesn't think about himself. He's not self-reflective. He knows what to do and he acts. And I had the thought, oh, this was an outlet for you of this kind of hyper confident, m- m- alpha male who is sure of his, urges and needs and destinations, and he doesn't think and he's not introspective, right?
mhm.
Um, and then So a big part of him losing his hand is that expression gets taken away, and then others are trying to change it, trying to change what Mandor is. And I think for the character, they're trying to change what I am. Mandor's kind of my id or inner whatever, and they're trying to change that. And so
Right.
to me, that's all the why we ever really get, is that this is just a guy who was pretty wound pretty tight in the first place, and then this trauma and the immediate aftermath of this trauma, which goes undealt with, tightens and tightens to the breaking point. And somehow in there, his severed hand comes to life and he controls it. There's no bolt of lightning. There's no mad scientist. There's no potion he drinks. A meteor doesn't go by overhead. It just starts happening, which is okay. Right. Or did I miss something?
Yeah. No. I think it's, there doesn't have to be an explanation. It's just you're either into a disembodied hand going around killing people or you're not,
They do a good job, and they have fun with the is he crazy or not. And a lot of the stuff we've already talked about kind of goes into the case of, well, he's crazy, right? He's having these blackouts. He's committing these crimes. He gets a prosthetic hand that we establish is, that it's a metal. It looks like the Terminator hand. He wears a glove over it.
And I don't want to. Let me cut in there for just a second. Did they have the technology for that, you think, in 1981?
Well, he's not controlling it with his mind. He has a harness that he has to.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
He has to strap around to his other shoulder. And the guy explains it when he's trying it on. As he extends his arm out, the grip tightens. So
okay.
It's which doesn't explain why it seems to have such a powerful grip. He's shaking somebody's hand, or he squeezes his own hand with it and is alarmed and a little frightened by how tight the grip is. And the prosthetic guy doesn't seem surprised. He's sort of waggling his eyebrows like, I know, right? So I don't know. Are your lat muscles that much stronger than your hand muscles? I don't know. But we established that his prosthetic hand, we see him crush a wine glass with it when he's tense about something, and a couple of other things where, getting the hang of this hand. So the concept of him killing somebody, choking somebody to death, you're like, but he only has one hand. And you're like, right, but it's a super strong hand.
Oh, yeah.
Seems very plausible. And we definitely see him hallucinate, right? The shower knob sort of turns into a hand, and he's seeing hands everywhere. There's something weird, like, I guess the closest thing to a supernatural, he's sitting out in like solarium or something. And the first big jump scare is this black cat, right? You hear it go meow outside, and it's a creepy sounding yowl. And then the cat jumps out of him and screams at him, and then jumps through a window, like not through an open window, but
through the glass.
like a
that was weird.
Jumped through the window, and cats don't do that.
No.
So that had me scratching my head a little bit. I mean, is that supposed to be a supernatural kind of thing, or what did you make of that?
I didn't quite understand it, to be honest. There were a couple of things with that I kind of made notes of. That so that solarium, like you said, is his studio where he does his work, and it's kind of, so in the beginning they live in Vermont. They have this beautiful big house, kind of in the woods in Vermont. And there's this separate outbuilding it's kind of like a glassed-in gazebo, I guess you would say. I loved that. I thought that was I just thought, wow, that would be really cool to have. And then there's a scene, it's before that cat scene, where they're setting it up, that the almost like the hand could be a reflex that he doesn't control. The cat has killed a lizard. And there's a tail that his small daughter is outside, and she's poking around something with a stick, and he goes over to see what's happened. And there's a lizard's tail, and it's squirming around, and she's saying and the cat is over a few feet away, eating the rest of the lizard. And the little girl says, she's remarking about the lizard tail still moving, and she thinks it's still alive, and he says it's just a reflex or whatever. So that's kind of foreshadowing for what's going to happen with his hand. But I thought that scene was funny because that lizard tail was about a foot long, and I thought, what lizard is that big living in Vermont? I'm not aware of
clearly
iguanas or something like that.
And the lizard tail was clearly mechanical too.
Yeah, it was very mechanical. It looked pretty fake.
And yet it was still a creepy scene because something about the way that little mechanical tail writhed. So what she was saying is she wasn't poking it with the stick. She's like, it wiggles faster when I get the stick close to it. So like she would go to poke it, and before she had poked it, the lizard tail would wiggle faster. And then she'd pull the stick away and it would calm down a little bit. And she'd start reaching the stick out toward it again. And when the stick got close, the lizard tail would wiggle faster. And that was really creepy because she's like, she's implying that it's alive. It knows when the stick is close. And he's like, no, it's just a reflex. But then they go back and they show that it responds when the stick gets close, like it can sense the stick.
Right.
And just before you have a chance for that to sort of land, the cat jumps back in and runs off with the tail.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is another little jump scare moment.
And I don't know if you noticed in the opening credits, but so this was based on a novel, but the guy's name is Mark Brandel, and the novel is not called The Hand. It's something about the lizard's tail. I forget exactly what the title was, but it was like The Story of the Lizard's Tail or something like that is what the book is called. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting to read this story and see how, how much it's like this or how different it is. But
yeah,
another
didn't
thing,
do any research on it. I just,
I just saw that it was in the opening. It was in the opening credits somewhere. And another thing, kind of with effects, at times it looks kind of wonky when he is walking around with the severed arm. It looks like it's too long or something. There were a couple of scenes where they would show close-ups, and it looked real enough that I wonder if they just used somebody who actually was missing a hand, like to shoot those close-ups. But then they did a smart thing, I thought, from a filmmaking standpoint. They show the scene with the robot hand, and then the doctor says, so you can wear a glove, and you change the glove every month or so. And then basically from then on, he just has this black glove on in the movie. So they don't ever have to show the robot hand anymore after that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, I feel like it was great because the effects are often kind of corny. And so some of these movies, right, when we watched Possessor, some of these movies seemed like this scene is an excuse to show what it looks like when somebody sticks a steak knife into somebody's jugular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the point of the scene is we want to make this prosthetic neck and show the blood pumping out and these, ruby red spurts. And we're going to really let the camera linger on that because that's what I want to show you, right? The person isn't shot. The person isn't stabbed in the back. The point of the shot is to show what it looks like when a knife goes into somebody's neck.
Mm-hmm.
And they spend a lot of time on that effect, right? And then as we watch it, we judge it. We say, that looks really real, or, oh, that's a terrible effect, right? Well, these are just terrible effects for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But they are effective effects. In other words, the point is not to make the coolest looking realistic lizard's tail in the universe. It's a pretty half-assed lizard's tail at first glance. But the scene is effective. You still feel discomfited by it, right?
Right.
And it ends in a scary thing that's genuinely scary, even though you're like, oh, okay, black cat again. But it gets you.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not watching this movie in 1981. We're watching it in 2020. Like, how many black cat jump scares have we seen in the course of our lives? Hundreds, I'm sure.
And they almost always work, if they're executed well.
Right. And so I guess what I'm saying is the effect and the bit can both look and be cheap but that's not a guarantee that it's going to be effective. And in this case, I feel like it's pretty effective every single time they play it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I wasn't afraid to turn off the lights. I wasn't
Yeah,
writhing in terror, but it was an entertaining scary. I thought,
definitely.
"Ooh,
Yeah,
wow, look at that!"
it's a fun scary.
And the hand didn't go through a huge spectrum of. The hand choked people. The hand didn't gouge out
The
eyes
hand didn't
or.
have any character development.
Right, exactly. You can imagine certain horror directors would think of all the different ways that the hand could murder people. This one just
Mm-hmm.
choked people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it was still scary. There's one scene where, there's a woman sort of, I forget which woman it is. It might be the co-ed that he's having an affair with, but she's sort of on the bed or looking down for something, and the hand, the last thing you see before we cut to something else is the hand sort of springs up and does a face palm on her.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a part of the sound design is this sort of
Yeah, I really liked that. Yeah, that made me laugh. That was funny.
like an old timey punch,
Three
like
Stooges kind of
yeah,
slap or something. Yeah,
exactly. It was a comic sound drop.
I really liked that. Yeah.
But in the moment, you like her and you don't want her to die, and the hand
No.
is scary, and it's there. And so when it pops out, the fact that there's this funny little button on it,
Mm-hmm.
like my favorite horror is a blend of at least the awareness of the comic. Some of them are very campy and overtly funny sometimes to leaven the gore or whatever. And other ones um, are made all the scarier just by having the scary parts of the movie aren't necessarily funny, but there are other elements of the film that are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's this kind of blend of the comic and the horrific add up to like they let you off the hook, and they get you laughing to kind of release the pressure for a little bit.
Right.
And I think of those movies as, they do that because their ultimate goal is they want the film to be ultimately entertaining, and that the fear that you feel is a part of that entertainment, but that you can walk out of the theater, laughing and talking with your friends and not, unable to look each other in the eye, and you go to bed that night and can't sleep for the nightmares.
Yeah.
Some horror movies are clearly trying to scar your mind. They're like, we don't want you to ever be able to forget the horrors you see tonight, and we want this to really upset you.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been much in for those movies. I don't enjoy
No,
that.
you're right.
But I thought this was super entertaining because it does it in little ways. There's not a lot of jokes or funny bits, but it's the comedy, that comic sensibility is just like that teaspoon of salt that goes into an otherwise sweet recipe. There's that little comics
Mm-hmm.
and the face is a perfect example of it. And the writhing kind of 2-bit looking lizard's tail. I mean, at first glance, it's funny. It's just kind of, it only moves one way. It's like bend straight, bend straight, bend straight, bend straight, bend straight, But then the more you look at it and the more the music is getting you in the background, it does that when the stick gets closer, and then the cat runs off with it, and you go, oh, and you get the chills.
Right.
So the comedy is part of that, I guess, is what I'm positing, that it's not, you're not laughing at it because he was a fool and put in a stupid, why did he do that? Because he doesn't know what he's doing. No, he knows what he was doing. And it lets you laugh at a scene, and we can laugh about it later, but the scene scared you in the moment, and that was
Mm-hmm.
part of it.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fact that, even though this was only the second movie that he had directed, it's obvious from watching this that he's a talented filmmaker. And, you could see that, you could have watched this movie and said, okay, this guy is going to, I don't know that you could have predicted that he was going to do Platoon and JFK and Born on the 4th of July and things like that. But, the there's very little of this movie that is actually the hand killing people. It's almost, I'm not saying this in comparison that it's on this level as far as a film, but it's almost kind of like a Jaws or something like that, where they're, you see the monster in this case so little, and some of that is the limitation of the time that, there wasn't quite the ability to. You kind of feel like if this movie were remade now, they would do a CGI hand, and they would have the hand, running up, climbing up people all over them and things. They would probably try to do too much of showing the hand, and then it would be a, kind of a fake looking CGI hand instead of a kind of fake looking rubber hand. So I think a lesser filmmaker and maybe a lower budget film, it wouldn't be as effective because you wouldn't have the, it wouldn't be as directed as well. And like I said, this is played straight for the most part.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make it feel like the whole thing is just a cornball, lower than B-level movie, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No.
So I think the fact that you have all of this real, there's some not necessarily like these are Academy Award performances, but there's Michael Caine he's not phoning this in, and the other actors don't seem, they're playing it straight like they're in a serious drama,
Absolutely.
And I think that helps the film a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that there was something about the era too, that the horror wasn't just about the monster. The horror was about the effect that the monster had on the people. And that was a psychological effect that you saw play out in their relationships. Right. So even when you're in Jaws and you're not out in the boat, like in the proximity of the shark, it's affecting his marriage. It's affecting his relationship with the mayor. It's affecting the townspeople's relationship with each other. And even though we can't necessarily, I hope, relate to getting attacked by a giant great white shark, we can definitely relate to what it's like to be a member of a community or a family, or a police department or whatever, when there is tension and danger and a threat and no clear answer and nobody knows what to do, when we don't feel safe. And I think one of the traps that more modern movies have fallen into, you mentioned CGI, which I think it's just too easy to think, oh, well, now we don't have to rely on the audience's imagination. We can show them the horrors. And that's the mistake.
Yeah.
Because I don't think CGI is in and of itself an evil thing, but
no.
too much of it, your brain turns off because there's no work for your brain to do. It's because it's all served up to you right there on the screen. So what you see is literally what you get and no more. There isn't room for your imagination to fill in any blanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think modern ones that fail spend a lot of time like, now the monster can do this, and now the monster's doing that, and now the monster's doing it, while it's moonwalking, and you're kind of like,
yeah,
this isn't making it more scary for me.
That's the classic thing with Jaws is, the basically the shark just didn't work most of the time, so they had to, they had to work around the limitations that they had. Whereas if somebody will remake the original Jaws at some point, and you will see the shark a whole lot more, and it's probably not going to benefit.
Or Alien
is
the other example. Go back and rewatch Alien. You don't see much of the xenomorph.
Right.
You really don't. You see pieces of it. You see its hand or its tail or that sort of mouth coming out of the darkness. But until the end, you don't really witness the thing in its full form. And by that point, you're just kind of down to it and Ripley.
Yeah.
And the whole movie has just been the monster in the shadows.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
that's not entirely because the face hugger thing is pretty upsetting,
Yeah.
right? They land on the alien planet and then the thing grabs the guy's face and then they bring him back on board and they don't know how to get it off of him. And that goes on for a while. And that's all really upsetting. And then, of course, when it comes out of his chest, it's super upsetting.
Oh, yeah.
And surprising. And then this thing is loose on the ship and then they all start to die off. It picks them off one at a time, but you don't see a lot of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you have the later ones where, especially like this last one, Covenant, where you have a bunch of CGI xenomorphs and, they kind of work, but they kind of don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the exception I would say to that would be Aliens. But James Cameron picking that property up really, it was a smart thing to do. It was a different take. So I would argue that that's less of a horror movie and more of an action movie.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you see a bunch of the xenomorphs, but it's more an us versus them and hold the line and how are we going to get. It's a tactical thing. It's Starship Troopers, trying to. There's an enemy force. And not just something lurking in the shadows. I thought that was a great movie too. I thought that was really effective.
Oh yeah, for sure. One thing with this one, and this makes me think of our conversation on the last two movies with Bone Tomahawk and then Possessor, that were both these very graphic movies. This is another movie that's rated R, but you think of how violence has changed in the last 35, 40 years or whatever. The only real gore you could say in this film is in the very beginning when he loses the hand.
Right.
There's a good bit of blood, and I thought it's kind of funny in the movie where they get him out of the car and he's bleeding everywhere, and there's blood spraying from his severed arm onto his wife. It's kind of spraying in the face and stuff. But that's really the only
funny, but also really upsetting thing. Like, the shot of the hand flying off looks like a fake hand going, but then the acting, they pull over and there's blood all over him and shooting out of his arm. And he is screaming in pain in a way that is consistent with somebody just having your hand ripped off.
Oh, for sure.
And nobody is quite sure for a second what happened. And the wife had been driving and, she jumps out and runs around and he collapses to the ground and she runs over by his side and sort of rolls him over towards her and, picks up his hand to see what's going on. And there is this sort of, not a geyser of blood, but the thought I had was a sort of an ejaculation. There's sort of, it's not overt, but she gets a squirt of blood, all up her face and recoils as you do if you got unexpectedly squirted in the face. And it's a really upsetting moment. Like, it's clearly a deliberate thing that they had to choreograph and whatever.
Right.
Or maybe it's an accidental thing, but it plays as deliberate. Like, you think, oh man, that's so upsetting. Like, to navigate an accident like this in real time. And then they go looking for the hand because of course the hope would be that you could maybe reattach the hand, but they can't find it.
Yeah.
They get a tourniquet on him, right? That's what she has a scarf or a belt or something. She takes off, tourniquet his arm and tells somebody to call the police. And then they all go looking for the hand, but they can't find it. But that scene in the aftermath, and I kept waiting for him to like blame her because they were having an argument and she was kind of driving and they had some driver behind them honking and they were going to go around the truck and right. The wife was kind of driving angry and the hand, he was like waving the car around, go around, stop, and his hand is out the window and the truck sort of swerves and she sort of swerves and the rear end of the big truck shears off his hand.
I have kind of a funny Go ahead.
It's
Sorry.
kind of corny, but also pretty upsetting. Like that's
Yeah,
another
it's
example of
effective. You know.
it being like it really lands, but it also looks corny.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting that how so this was an R-rated movie, but how tame it seems in comparison to some of these other R-rated movies that we've watched recently. There's very little blood in this. There's a little bit of nudity. There's a little bit of profanity, and that's otherwise it's a pretty tame film when you think of how shocking some of these other R-rated films are. But this particular scene with the car accident, I have a kind of a funny story with this. So I saw a little bit of this movie when I was a kid. So whenever this would have first been on HBO, it was probably 1982 or something like that. So, I was 8 or 9 years old. I was watching TV with my dad, and he turned to HBO, and this was on. And so we watched a few minutes, and then when it got too intense, he changed it to something else. But I saw this scene where his hand gets cut off, and that always stuck with me. And to this day, I'm not kidding. If I see somebody driving and they have their arm hanging out the window, I cannot help but think of this movie. I always think, and he's not really, it's not a situation where he would just had his arm hanging out. He's trying to direct this car to go back so they don't, because he can see that they're going to crash. But that has been burned into my mind, basically. If you have your arm, if a person has their arm hanging out the window, if there's an accident, they're gonna their
That
hand
hand's
is
gonna go around killing people.
It's gonna go around killing people. But I don't know. It's just funny, those things that you see as a kid, and it just kind of never never leaves your mind. I didn't really remember anything else from this movie because I'd only seen just those brief scenes. But
Sure.
I'll never forget this particular scene.
Well, I think those moments from cinema of our childhood are kind of what drives this podcast. I mean, we talked about it in The Black Hole and Maximilian, and in I keep wanting to say Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon. Like that scene where the gold-faced vizier falls on the spikes, and then inexplicably his eyes extrude from the mask. Burned into my mind. Seeing those things as a kid, and they inform certainly my experiences in cinema today. But like you say, every time you see someone driving down the road with their arm out the window, you're thinking of that scene that you saw as a kid. And I think, I don't know, maybe that's a universal thing. I don't think we can be alone in that. That's got to be.
No, I don't think so. Because I mean, we talked about Jaws. How many people that saw Jaws 30, 40 years ago think of that when they go to the beach?
Right. Right.
It's, and even people, it's totally irrational, but I think people swim anywhere. You swim in a lake and you can't see, it's the water's dark and you can't see what's below you. I think people are always thinking, it doesn't make any sense, but I think people, that kind of pops in people's mind. Oh, what if there were a shark or some other, creature in here that's going to attack me while I'm swimming? I mean, I know that movie scarred people forever.
Oh yeah.
As far as swimming in the ocean,
to the degree that there are public service announcements that shark attacks are extremely rare.
That's the thing that's hilarious. Like it that's one of those things, doesn't seem to happen so much now because we have such a crazy news cycle, but slow news cycles in the past, in the summertime, there'd be a shark attack, somewhere, and experts say, I mean, it's in like the single digits worldwide each year, people killed by sharks.
Right.
So the overwhelming odds are you're never going to get killed or bitten or whatever by a shark, almost no matter how much time even you would spend going to the beach. But people have that fear of that.
Yep, absolutely. So Just sort of starting to tie this off, it sounds like we would both recommend this movie.
Yeah. I think this is I like this movie a lot. It's again, it's not a so bad it's good. It's a well-made film. There's some cheesiness with it, but I suppose some of this depends on how much you like Michael Caine. I mean, I've always
Yeah,
loved him as an actor. There's a reason why he's been in a million movies because he's just really great. He's not really likable in this. I mean, he's kind of a dick, throughout most of the movie, but um, he's not so unlikable that you just don't care. And like you said, you care about this girl that he's involved with. You don't want to see her die, and of course she does. But yeah, I definitely recommend this.
yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it's entertaining. I think if anything, by today's standards, it's a little bit of a slow burn.
Mhm.
It doesn't.
And I think kind of all of the. I mean, you watch. I don't know that you would watch any movie from this time frame, and I just think we have been so conditioned over time to quick cuts. I think all of these movies seem slow by comparison to today, and simpler too. Um, but looking on IMDb, this has a 5.5, and it only has 5,400 ratings. So I mean, there's a whole lot of people that I would say are just not familiar with this movie at all.
I had never heard of it. When
Oh,
you
okay.
when you
I didn't.
proposed it to me, I was like, "Oh yeah." I was like, "What?" And then you said Oliver Stone. I was like, "What? Michael Caine? I have never heard of this."
The poster is terrible. This is a newer poster that they've made that was probably a DVD cover or something, but it's really awful. Um, it's just kind of they've taken like a picture of a hand, and you can tell just somebody in Photoshop has kind of posterized it or something, and that's the image on Amazon Prime. It just looks really terrible. So, I don't know why they didn't put Michael Caine on the cover of it, because I could see people just kind of flipping through and seeing the hand, and it's like, what is this image? You know, um, I don't know. I don't know why they have such an awful poster for it.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe there's no clear money make. Maybe nobody clear stands to benefit from
Yeah.
increased. Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I have no idea.
But yeah, people, if you like, kind of B horror movies, but that actually have a nice sheen to them. If you like Michael Caine, if you're an Oliver Stone fan and you want to see where he started out. Another interesting thing with Oliver Stone, I don't know if you know or not, he didn't direct it, but he wrote the screenplay for Conan the Barbarian.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so for a guy that went on, to be this really respected Academy Award winning director, he started out in some right in genre stuff.
Well, Conan was great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, not that Conan is a bad movie, but
I
it's
thought
kind
this
of
was really well done.
yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I think it's clear that the talent, you could see the talent. And to go from this to Full Metal Jacket, I think that it makes sense to me that if the money players who could greenlight Full Metal Jacket saw this, they saw enough to be like, okay, this kid knows what he's doing. You know what
Yeah,
I
he
mean?
was. I
Because they
don't want
wouldn't
to.
be like, maybe he'll be good. That's just not how Hollywood works.
He was. Um, I don't mean to correct you, but he did Platoon. Full Metal Jacket
Oh,
was
sorry.
Stanley Kubrick. Yeah,
Yep.
but yeah,
Sorry.
Platoon. I
My
think it
bad.
won. I think it won Best Picture, and it was just like 5 years after this. So,
But the two movies came out at a similar. Didn't they come out near each other?
yeah.
Yeah, and
I
both
think
of them, I
Full
feel
Metal
like they
Jacket
were.
was maybe like 87 or something like that. I think Platoon was 86, right around the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why they are associated in my mind. Two
Hmm.
Vietnam movies, hard hitting Vietnam movies,
Oh yeah,
right next to each other in the timeline.
absolutely. But yeah, definitely thumbs up for this one. This fits right into, this is a very appropriate for the podcast.
So, what shall we do next? Just to drop in, if you have thoughts, we are Chris and Chris Talk Movies at gmail.com. You can submit a request that we do a movie that you love, or you can just give us some feedback. We'd love to hear from you.
For sure.
And we've gotten in the habit now of trying to decide what our next one is going to be. I suppose we could talk about it offline, but we end up spending the last few minutes trying to decide here. So if you're listening, you can watch along with us if you like. What do you think? You want to do the martial arts one, or
Yeah, we can do, if that works for you, we could do that.
Sure, because I thought I'd never heard of that before too, and it looks like it might have some juicy, meat on the bones to pick
It's
at.
either going to be fun or it's just going to be so awful
Terrible,
that
right.
it's like a slog, to get through it. We'll see. And that one is, for anybody listening along, it is free on Prime.
Great.
And it's an old, it's around the same time, 80, 81, 82, something like that. But at least based on the trailer, the print looks fantastic. It looks like, somebody's put some money into remastering it. I don't know if you're familiar with some of the guys that used to be on Mystery Science Theater 3000 do a thing called Riff Tracks, where they, just make fun of the movies. And there's a Riff Tracks version of Kill and Kill Again also.
Kill and Kill Again is the name of the
Yes.
film. We're going to watch it for next time. It's an early 80s martial arts extravaganza, dare I say?
As far as I know, it does not have Steven Seagal. It seemed like every movie he did had kill somewhere at the title, but
Sure.
I don't think he's in this one.
That's good, because I'm not such a great big
Me
fan.
neither. Yeah, I don't,
Great.
I'm
Okay,
not a
so
fan either.
we both give you a enthusiastic thumbs up for The Hand, early 80s horror, Michael Caine. Yeah, baby.
Can't go wrong.
Yeah, can't go wrong. You might think it's a little slow. It's not a rollicking joyride, but there's a lot to love. And it's entertaining. And for next week, Kill and Kill Again. So as always, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you next week.